So my name is Nicola Coley. You may know me from outreach or just trying to get you into this industry link community. But essentially today we are celebrating our holiday party to commemorate a great year of relationships, new people that you might have in your circle, and essentially making sure that diversity is seen in commercial real estate and finance. So once again, I just want to welcome you to this space. But most of all, I want to welcome our amazing guest speaker today. His name is Karim Hutson, and he is not only a diversity piece in the industry, he is a founder and CEO of his own development firm. So just take a second to just please give him a round of applause. All right. So before we get right into it, I just want to read his bio because he has a long track record of making an impact on this industry. So Karim Hutson is the president and CEO of Genesis Companies, a top multifamily developer he founded in 2004. A leader in affordable housing development, Hutson brings over 20 years of experience in development, finance, and asset management to foster sustainable communities. Under Karim's leadership, Genesis has completed over $1 billion in development activity, showcasing his expertise as an urban real estate investor, dedicated to creating and preserving mixed income communities in underserved neighborhoods. Karim has been honored as a notable Black leader by Crain's New York Business. He actively contributes to various nonprofit and civic organizations, including the Harvard Divinity School, Dean's Council, the New York City Independent Budget Office, the Vera Institute of Justice, and the Citizen Budget Commission. Karim has served on the boards of the Dalton School and Habitat for Humanity in New York City. He holds a BA in Economics and Philosophy from Amherst College, an MBA from Harvard Business School, and an MTS from Harvard Divinity School. So once again, please give a round of applause to our amazing guest speaker. So we want to make sure that we shine the spotlight on him and every single thing that he's done in this industry. So I'm going to pass it off to him to do an intro of essentially who he is and what he thought about when he created Genesis Companies.
Hey guys, how are you? So I guess y'all figured I was a speaker since I'm the oldest guy in here. I must have got, how old was more people in 2004? Nobody? Six. Wow. All righty, great way to start it off. But anyway, I just want to say I'm on a little bit of fumes. I came in on a 6 a.m. flight, and I thought the event was tomorrow, and I was like, you know what? Oh my God. But I was so appreciative of Nicole hitting me up on LinkedIn and asking me to be here to speak to y'all. And this is part of what we need to be doing with each other, right? Taking the time to talk about our story, to talk about what we're going through, to talk about how we got where we are, the good, the bad, the ugly. And so I'm just really want to start by saying, one, how proud I am of all you guys, that you guys are here, that you guys are networking, that you guys are trying to figure out how you can grow your careers, how you can give back. It is really important to see diversity in the finance. And as you can imagine, when I graduated from college in 96, this room would have been 20% of the people, right? But we grew it to where you guys are now by doing things like this, right? And people who were in my position came here, even though they got on the plane at 6 a.m. to make sure they talked to us and tell us the things that we needed to do. So I'm just really proud of y'all. I'm thankful for y'all. I appreciate you guys having me and listening to me. So much love back to you guys for that, all right? Give yourselves a round of applause. I started Genesis in 2004. I'll say, I grew up in New York City. I'm a New York City boy. Grew up in the Bronx and in Harlem. Any Bronx, Harlem folks? All right, good stuff, good stuff. I still live in Harlem now. That's where most of our real estate is owned and managed. In the Bronx, back in the day, I grew up in the 80s. Was not a phenomenal place to be honest with you. We had the crack epidemic. New York never really had the gang so much back then. But we suffer from a lot of issues, especially in the real estate itself, right? Like asthma, sick building syndrome, pest infestations. Poorly managed buildings falling apart. My mom raised me pretty much for most of my life. My dad died when I was 3. My mom got remarried to a wonderful man who I consider my father and is my father. And she sacrificed everything she could do to basically ensure that I had the opportunity to be in this room right now. And so I give her tons of credit for that. When I went to Dalton, and I went to Amherst, I met a couple of people when I ran for student body president who were trustees, and they asked me what I wanted to do with my life. And I don't know about y'all, but for my parents, it was like 3 things were kind of acceptable. It was like, you could be a lawyer or you could be a doctor. And it was pretty much not a lot of other options. And so when I told them that I was going to business, they were like, what? Like, what is that? Like, what are you doing? In fact, I had no idea what it was. In fact, I told the guy, he was a vice chairman of Merrill Lynch. I'm happy he didn't walk out the room at that point. But I told him, like, you think I'm gonna sit around and like do numbers, like sit behind these like large spreadsheets all day? Like, I'm never doing that. But I just didn't have the exposure that you guys now have to business. I didn't really have family members who were in business to talk about what it meant. But I was smart enough to take the opportunity. So I actually went out to Maryland, Chicago for my first internship, and ended up working in investment banking after undergrad. I was at Goldman Sachs back when they had anybody work at Goldman Sachs? So back in the day, they had an investment banking division, which I think they still have now, and they had like a mergers and acquisitions department, which all they did was just do all the mergers and acquisitions that Goldman was hired to advise on. And that was actually led by one of the first black partners on the street, G.A. Zeitlin. And he was the one who gave me an opportunity, just to see how small the world works. He's the one who gave me the opportunity to go work at Goldman, right? And he was actually an Amherst College alum. So as you talk about and think about your life and your profession, like relationships continue to be the most major component of everything that you do in business, right? Relationships trump everything. And so I developed a relationship with him, and he hired me to go to Goldman. I did that for a couple of years. And then I actually met at Goldman. I wasn't even doing technology, but I met one of the partners who happened to think I was really smart. He was going over to General Atlantic Partners. Have you guys heard of General Atlantic Partners? So General Atlantic basically does private equity, right, in the technology industry. Now, I didn't know crap about technology, but he was like, listen, don't worry about that. We'll teach you. I did that for 2 or 3 years. And it's interesting. I could have probably made a lot of money. I'm sure my wife would be like, how come you didn't dummy? How come you didn't keep doing that? But I just didn't love it. And that's kind of lesson number 3. Like, it's so important to be passionate about what it is that you want to do and what you are doing. You know, you guys are all 20-somethings, maybe teens. No, I'm just kidding. And close the bar. No. But it's a long road, and I don't mean that to make you feel like, oh my God, but it's a long road to be doing something you're not happy about, you know? And honestly, I was honest with myself, because I really didn't at that point have to go to business school. You know, everybody kind of wanted to be in technology and do private equity, but I had to have an honest moment about who I wanted to be and what was gonna make me happy doing what I wanted to do. And so I made the decision, hey, you know what? I wanna do something different. And I thought about real estate because I felt like I remembered where I grew up and where I came from. And I said to myself, I said, listen, I've learned how to do analysis. I've kind of learned how to make an investment through GA. I feel like I'm smart enough to do better than these guys. Like I don't know why I can't figure out how to put up a building and run it so that like it actually is safe. It doesn't have infestations everywhere, and it can be sustainable, right? And by the way, still make money, right? Because at the end of the day, like if something makes no money, it's probably not gonna be sustainable financially, right? So I was like, it can't be that hard, right? And that was really the basis for which I started Genesis. You know, I'll throw my MTS, my theology hat on for a second. But you know, as you guys know, Genesis is the first book of what? Like the Bible, the Torah, right? And so if you go to the actual, she's probably kick me off the stage. I'm going too religious. But if you go to the actual like authentic literal translation of like in the beginning when God began to create, blah blah blah. It's actually doesn't say in the beginning. It says when God began to create. When God began to create, the heavens were gotta get my theology back. The heavens, it was darkness filled the earth, and essentially the world was in disarray, right? Like there was no difference between the sun and the darkness. There was just a mass of nothingness, right? And so really, if you look at the authentic kind of interpretation of Genesis, it wasn't so much that God began to create something out of nothing. He actually formed and created order, right? He kind of improved on what was already there, right? And so the basis of Genesis is thought that like in these communities, in urban areas, there's actually goodness there, right? There's community there, right? And our job is to improve upon that. It's to take what's there and make it better, to make it sustainable, right? To create longevity, like to create connection. And that was the basis. I did a horrible job with Genesis interpretation, though, by the way. My professor's gonna hate me. But that was the basis of Genesis, and that's why we named it thus. And so that's really what we're doing every day. I literally started another connection. Like I started the business with nothing. Two of my friends from Harvard Business School, actually my friend from Harvard Business School, Ann Amherst, and his dad gave me a salary of like 50 grand. I was just graduated from Harvard Business School. And we're like, good luck. Like, we'll help you on pre-development, but, they gave me an office in their self-storage building, which was down in Soho, their headquarters. And it was just me in a little cubby. I hired my first guy, Paul Carter, who was with me for like maybe 20 some odd years. He recently did leave and do some stuff. And he used to always get mad at me because we moved into a little small room. It was like my desk and his desk. And when I wanted to talk to him, I would call him on the phone. He'd be like, dude, I'm right behind you. Why are you calling me on the phone? So we started from 2 people, and now we're at 75 people, which is crazy. We started our first project in Jersey City, and that was 40 units. We just closed in September a $500 million project with the New York City Housing Authority that was close to 700 units. We have integrated the firm from just being a pure development firm to a firm that not only does development at a large scale, but also does property management and also does construction in some capacity. I'll say that, one of the things we really focus on in our thesis is turning around problematic projects. So we often work some level of restriction, affordable restriction. So we work a lot with government, municipalities, housing authorities, nonprofits who have land and don't know quite what to do with it. And we try to figure out ways to improve the predicament of those buildings. So we take on a lot of tough portfolios and we turn them around and we try to make them sustainable. We focus on some green stuff and some low cost funding for that. So that's really the Genesis story. I just ran through it quickly. I'll take questions, and I'm happy to talk about. I can talk about real estate all day. I can talk about life. I can talk about growth. We can talk about connections. So I'm just happy to be here. I do want to thank my assistant Amari for coming out tonight. Thank you. And again, thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, thank you so much. I don't want to hold you too long with my questions, but I do want to open it up to the general group. Whether you have questions about how to start your career or just in terms of asking about investor sentiment, how the market's essentially for a developer, I want to invite you guys to ask questions. So does anybody have a question so far? All right. You can feel free to step up.
I truly appreciate it. I don't know if this is loud enough, but Tyron, by the way, I work at UBS, and I work in group finance, but and I'm probably older than the crowd. I'm 31 years old, and I'm just wondering about pivoting at certain stages in your life, right? And it's very easy to fall in the trap of this makes more money, this makes more money, but you took the risk. You said, I want to do something that I love, regardless of how much money I'm making, at least initially in the shorter term. Like, can you explain, like, when is it necessary to go ahead and take that risk versus, taking your time and gaining some more expertise in your area?
Yeah. That's an excellent question. So he's basically asking, when does it make sense to really take a risk in your career, maybe pivot to something you might want to do? At what point does it make sense to make the decision versus to continue to just build expertise in your profession? Some of it depends on what that pivot is, right? So I will say this, like I pivoted twice, right? So I pivoted industries, right? And then I also pivoted like to start a company, right? So that's like two major pivots. And so I think let's talk about pivoting to like a different industry. The great thing now about the type of life that you guys have demanded in the market, and I give you your generation and the generation above you a lot of credit, is that like this whole notion that you guys have to be somewhere for like 5-6 years, like you guys have completely eradicated that, right? And so nobody really penalizes you anymore for moving, right? So I would say that, as a young person, right, like you should get as many great experiences as you can, but be committed to the experience that you have when you're there, right? Get the most out of it, make the most connections. You absolutely do not know who will knock on your door in 10 years and say, hey, I remember you worked for me at UBS. You were an analyst but I'd love to bring you in to do this at Rex, right? So you don't know what the opportunities will be down the road. But I think where there's failure is, hey, I'm looking at a lot of different things, but I'm not focused on the opportunity that's right in front of me and maximizing that, right? And I think when you get in your mind and say, hey, you know what? I've maximized this opportunity. Like I want to maybe look at something different or experience something different. I don't think the market penalizes you guys at your age for doing that, right? So I think you should do that, right? But take advantage of what's in front of you. Don't just keep looking, go somewhere and keep looking somewhere else. And in terms of like a company, like that's a big deal and it's hard. And I tell people like, you also like, people come to me and they say they want to start a company, but they have another career, right? And they say, what I'm going to start is real estate, so I'm going to like kind of do a little bit of it. I'm kind of going to dabble, do a little dancing. And like this is a full-time gig. Like running a company and starting a company and managing a company is a big deal. And it takes a lot of time and it's hard, it's brutal, blood, sweat, tears. It's not fun. Everybody says, oh, it's so great, you work for yourself, but they have no idea the drama that you go through doing that, right? And so that mentality is different. And I think one of the things I tell everybody is not everybody has to do that to have a significant impact in their profession, right? Like I have a chief operating officer, I have a chief legal officer, I have a managing director of development. They probably could all start a company if they wanted to, right? And they have enormous skill, but they just don't want to do that. And that's okay, right? My COO likes to be a COO, right? So I think if you live with yourself and honest about what it is that you want to do, right, then you make good decisions. And I would say if you really make a decision to start a company, you want to do that on the earlier side. Like I can't imagine if I went home and it's like, oh, by the way, I'm going to quit my job. I'm just going to start. I got 2 kids. So like, I'm just going to start something. You can do that, but you have to have a lot of stability because you have other people you're not responsible for, right? And so it becomes harder to make those critical decisions as you get older. So take advantage of the time you have, think about it. And I would also say now that like, look, Harvard Business School is not what made me is not who allowed me to start my real estate business. Harvard Business School has put me in a position that I can now manage a business better than I could if without it, right? But really, the nuts and bolts of what allowed me to start Genesis and get it going, like it's here. It's here, it's in the belly, and it's intuition, and it's will, right? Like, the best way to keep a business going is to keep the business going, however you have to do it. So hopefully that answers your question.
right. Anybody else have a question? So you can come and stand. Feel free to introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hi, I'm Valerie. Nice to meet you.
Nice to see you.
So my question is, what obstacles did you have to overcome when convincing your investors when you first started, because you were new in the industry and also investing in high-risk areas, which they would consider high-risk areas? What obstacles did you have to overcome to convince them to invest with you?
Sure. It's a great question. So she asked me what obstacles I had to get through to convince investors to invest with me. A lot. So I would say, like, the basic obstacles is one. In real estate, it's about capital, right? Like, you have to have capital in order to be successful. And the truth of the matter is that most folks who come from a minority background like mine don't have family capital to put into a business. And so they're really trying to figure out ways to pull that together, right, so they can start and fulfill their vision. So that's the first thing, is that you're coming to the table and asking for more than what somebody else does, and you're asking for like basic stuff, like you can't even do your co-invest, right? And so that burden is high. I would also say that, like, you know, obviously the banks, when they want to invest in you, are looking for experience, right? And like, I'll be honest with you, like General Atlantic and Goldman Sachs were great resumes and we would love to have it, but no bank was really giving me money for a project because of that resume, right? That was great to talk to people and maybe connections, but that really wasn't what could get me an investment, right? Or a loan. So I'd say the way I got over that was to be creative. The first deal that I did in New York City, I actually partnered with a firm that I had worked for prior. It was another black-owned development firm. They since went out of business. And I said to them, listen, I want to do this deal. This is too small for you guys, but I really like it. I just need you guys to be my partner so that people will take my call. And they agreed to do that, which was phenomenal. And they really got out of my way because they weren't really that interested in doing the deal. So it became an opportunity where I was able to leverage their expertise and their experience. And the people, when I was applying for it, they talked about them. Oh yeah, Karim is doing it with Full Spectrum, right? So it kind of gave me that cover, right? So that was one of the ways I got through that. So I would say that, listen, you have to be creative about how you're going to address the obstacles that come in your path, right? But the will to get through them is still here, right? And sometimes, and I don't want to be like, you know, not saying no for an answer, not accepting no for an answer, but sometimes it's like, hey, I'm not going to accept no. That doesn't mean just being a pest. That may mean being creative about ways I can get through this hurdle, right? I will say this, you know, one of the unfortunate experience that I had was one of my first investors, not my friends, that I took after that where I needed some cash. And that was not a great situation, right? So I will also say that not every opportunity is a good one. And I learned a lot from that. It was depressing, it was hard work, it was legal. And I had to learn, okay, what do I take from this? How do I now think through the folks that I want to be around? How now do I think about partnerships in a different way, right? So you're going to also try to get through hurdles and get smacked down a little bit and be like, oh, shoot, I shouldn't have done that. Or I know not to do that again. And that's part of what networking, right, can help you try to avoid, right? Because you can learn from sometimes other people's mistakes. Hopefully that answers your question. Yeah, no problem. Thanks.
All right. We have space for one more question.
Back. Hey.
Aldair Ortiz, nice to meet you.
your name?
Aldair.
Aldair,
Nice to meet you. My question is, and it might be a little hard to answer, but how would you go about building a diverse community in your own workplace if that diversity isn't even there yet? So like that's something I've been like struggling. I like lead a team. Yeah, we're like, how do I create that diversity if it's not even there where I can bring in people?
Yeah. No, thank you for that. He said, how do you create diversity in your workplace when diversity isn't really there? That's hard. I mean, especially if you're in a large corporation. I mean, one of the things that I think worked when I was in corporate world was, and this is a long time ago, is I actually actively got engaged in the recruiting teams, right? So, for example, when Goldman went to Morehouse, right, or Goldman went to Amherst, right, or Goldman went to wherever, even if I didn't go to that school, like, and I could be a part of the team helping on the recruiting, like I would actively join that team, right, and try to seek out candidates and talk to candidates, right? A lot of times, even if I'm not in an interview room, like a bunch of students will sit around and they'll have the opportunity to learn about the firm, right? I think they still do that at schools, right? And so your face is a great way to inspire people, right? So I don't know who from this conversation today will be inspired to do some real estate stuff, right? Maybe, right? So you just sitting in a room talking to kids who may be younger than you, right, about what you're doing and what your daily life is like can inspire somebody, right, that looks like you to get into the industry. So to me, like that's the way to do it. I will say that, like, you know, as young professionals, I often find that we are very involved. You guys are very involved in your communities. Like, I just know, I'm pretty sure about that, right? That's just something sometimes we're ingrained in, right? Like, we want to try to figure out ways to give back, right? And oftentimes, like, we are at a disadvantage, sometimes minority professionals, young professionals, because we actually do more community work than some of our counterparts do. Now, that's kind of some of the burdens sometimes of coming from communities that you want to invest in and you want to do better. But be aware of that, right? And be thoughtful about what it is that you're putting your time into and how it can really be fruitful. So it's a hard question, but hopefully I gave you a couple of insights. Yeah, thanks.
Karim, thank you everyone for answering questions. Karim, thank you for your time. If you had one last piece of advice that you want to leave us with as we close out 2024, enter 2025, what would you like to say?
Make money, no. Last piece of advice. Decide on something and do it. Right? Decide on something and do it. The rewards don't go to the person who's thinking about it. Right? Sometimes you just gotta commit and go. And you're not gonna have all the answers. You're not gonna have all the answers. I did not have all the answers when I decided to start Genesis. I had vision, I had cojones, and I said, I'm going. And I had to piece it together. And you know, everything else you'll figure out. So that'd be my one piece.
All right. So it's been an absolute pleasure having you here. Just keep in mind that this is a CEO that responded this week, signed up to do it, and committed and showed up. So,
After a 6-hour flight.
yes, exactly. So if you're kind of wondering where your career is going to go when you're trying to decide what's the next pivot, just look at Karim as an example of you can do it someday. You just have to have the guts to do it. So thank you once again for joining us. And please take advantage of the open bar. It's open until 9 p.m. We'll bring out a couple more things for food. And I know he'll be here for a little bit longer. So don't rush, but definitely make your way to have a conversation with him. Thank you once again.